Imagine a man standing alone on top of a mountain, facing 450 opponents, not soldiers, not gladiators, prophets, men who claim to speak for a god, and this one man alone is about to bet his own life and the faith of an entire nation on a single question. Which of the two gods will answer with fire? This isn't legend. It isn't Greek myth. It isn't a story invented to impress. It's written in 1 Kings chapter 18, one of the most tense accounts in the entire Bible. And today, verse by verse, we're going to reconstruct exactly what happened that day on Mount Carmel. Without inventing anything, without exaggerating anything. Just the text and the truth it holds. If you've made it this far, stay with me until the end. Because the ending of this story changes the way you understand what it means to have real faith. To understand the duel on Carmel, you need to understand the depth of the desperation that came before it. Israel had gone 3 years without rain, not a single drop. The ground was cracked, the rivers were dry, the animals were dying. And this drought wasn't a climate accident. According to the biblical account, it was a judgment. King Ahab had abandoned the worship of the Lord God of Israel, and, together with his wife, Queen Jezebel, had promoted the worship of Baal, the Canaanite storm and fertility god, and Asherah, a pagan goddess. The text records something brutal. Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord. Religious persecution, systematic, sponsored by the throne itself. A man named Obadiah, the palace administrator under King Ahab himself, but a faithful worshiper of the Lord, hid 100 prophets in caves, split into 2 groups of 50, secretly bringing them food and water, risking his own life to do it. That's the backdrop. Famine, drought, religious persecution, and a king hunting down the only prophet who still dares to speak the truth. And it's exactly that prophet, Elijah, that God sends back into the scene. God gives Elijah a direct order. Go present yourself to King Ahab, because the rain is about to return. Along the way, Elijah runs into Obadiah, and Obadiah's reaction is telling. He kneels down, puts his face to the ground, and asks, almost in disbelief, "Is it really you? Is it you, my lord Elijah?" Obadiah is terrified. He tells Elijah that King Ahab has had him searched for in every nation on earth, even demanding that foreign kings swear they hadn't hidden him. Obadiah fears that the moment he tells the king, the Spirit of the Lord will carry Elijah away again, and that he, Obadiah, will pay with his life for a promise that never came true. Elijah then makes a solemn vow, "As the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to the king today." And he does. When Ahab sees Elijah, the first thing out of the king's mouth isn't a greeting, it's an accusation. "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" And Elijah's response is one of the sharpest lines in the entire Bible. "I'm not the one troubling Israel. It's you and your father's house, because you abandoned the Lord's commands and went after Baal." No fear, no hesitation. One man against the most powerful king in the region, face to face. Elijah doesn't back down. He raises the stakes. He demands that Ahab gather all of Israel on Mount Carmel. And not just the people. He demands they bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, all of them supported directly by Queen Jezebel herself. 850 pagan prophets, funded by the throne, against one man. Ahab agrees, and the people gather on the mountain. Elijah then asks the question that echoes through history: how long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. And the people say nothing. Total silence. A nation that no longer knows who to believe in, paralyzed between 2 religions, 2 kings, 2 altars. It's in that silence that Elijah proposes the test that will decide everything. The rules are simple and brutally fair. 2 bulls, 1 for each side. Each group cuts up the animal, places it on the wood, but doesn't light the fire. The prophets of Baal will pray to their god. Elijah will pray to the Lord. Whichever God answers by sending fire from heaven, that is the true God. The people agree, what you say is good. And then Elijah does something strategically devastating. He hands his opponent the entire advantage. Since you are so many, you prepare your bull first. He lets 450 men go first. No rush, no fear of losing the advantage, because he's not trusting in numbers or in spectacle. He's trusting in who he serves. From morning until noon, the prophets of Baal pray, shout, dance around the altar they built. Baal, answer us. Nothing, no response, no wind, no spark. And this is where the biblical narrative becomes almost uncomfortably direct, because at noon, Elijah begins openly mocking them. The text records the taunt word for word. Maybe their God is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling, or perhaps sleeping and needs to be woken up. It's public ridicule, in front of the entire nation, against a state-sponsored religious system. And that's when the desperation grows. Following their custom, the prophets of Baal grab knives and swords and cut themselves, seeking a response, pouring out everything they had into that plea. It's no longer calm prayer, it's screaming, desperation, an almost frantic effort to make anything at all happen. Time passes, noon passes, the whole afternoon passes, until it reaches the time of the evening sacrifice. And the sky remains exactly as it's been for hours, silent. When it's Elijah's turn, he doesn't reach for spectacle. He rebuilds the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down, using 12 stones, one for each tribe descended from the sons of Jacob, the man God renamed Israel. A symbolic gesture. He's reaffirming the unity of a divided nation. Then he digs a trench around the altar, lays the wood, and then he does something that seems counterproductive for someone who wants to see fire. He has 4 jars filled with water and poured over the sacrifice and the wood. Once, then again, then a third time. The water runs down, soaks everything, fills the trench around the altar. He's eliminating any possibility of trickery, any doubt, any natural explanation for what's about to happen. At the time of the evening sacrifice, Elijah approaches the soaked altar and prays, not shouting, not cutting himself, not dancing. A short, direct prayer. Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. And the fire falls. The biblical text describes its intensity. The fire consumes the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and even completely dries up the water in the trench around the altar. No trace of doubt remains. The entire crowd falls to the ground, faces down, and cries out, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" What happens next is an undeniable part of the biblical account, and it would be dishonest to leave it out. Elijah orders the prophets of Baal to be seized, and none of them escape. He takes them down to the Kishon Valley, and there they are put to death. It's a heavy detail in the narrative, set within a context of state-sponsored idolatry, religious persecution, and a covenant law in Israel that treated idolatry promoted by the ruling powers as spiritual treason against the entire nation. The text doesn't soften this fact, and this video won't soften it either. It's right there, in 1 Kings 18, verse 40. Shortly after, Elijah tells Ahab that the rain is coming. He climbs to the top of Carmel, bends down to the ground, and sends his servant to look toward the sea 7 times in a row. The first 6 times, nothing. On the 7th, the servant comes back and says, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." A cloud the size of a hand. That's all God needs to show before. Minutes later, the sky fills with dark clouds, the wind picks up, and a heavy rain falls on a land that had suffered for 3 years. So what does 1 Kings 18 actually teach us? It's not just a story about fire falling from the sky. It's the story of a man who stood alone against an entire nation, a king, a queen, and 850 religious voices, and didn't back down because his confidence wasn't in numbers, or spectacle, or popular approval. The people, before the fire fell, stood in silence, paralyzed between 2 altars, unable to decide. It's an image that echoes across centuries, people caught between what they know to be true and what's more comfortable or popular to follow. Elijah's question still echoes. How long will you waver between 2 opinions? This story, recorded almost 3,000 years ago, doesn't ask you to believe blindly. It records a public, verifiable test in front of witnesses, and it invites every reader to answer the same question the people on Carmel had to answer that day. If you want to keep exploring the Bible with real stories, verse by verse, no embellishment and no distortion, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Which Bible story do you want us to reconstruct next?